Hello, my name is Bill Haley, and this is for Haley 2024, The Movements, Government Reform Ideas. Now, this video is going to be on the general clauses. Now, what I'm doing here is creating a new constitution for the United States, state constitutions, and locality constitution. The same constitution, it keeps the three levels of government, federal, state, and local, and it has the same constitution on all three of them with words with local, state, and federal, with different responsibilities for each. So let's go through it real quick and let's see what we're talking about here. This Constitution is going to give a lot more liberty, a lot more freedom, a lot more free enterprise, a lot less monopolized government power. And what we're talking about is competitive governance is going to be the big idea here. So let's go through it real quick. So this video is going to be on the general clauses, but I'm going to rapidly go through a very quick overview of the full Constitution. So we take all government power split into 30 sectors. We'll go over that in a second. Let's go over that real quick. Here's the 30 sectors. We have 5 in the charity system, 5 in the foreign protection system, 5 in the violent crime system. We have 15 other sectors. Now, each of these sectors has top elected leaders, distinct. So the top elected leader for financial is different than the one for environmental. The ones for roads are different than the ones for education. Police is different than military. Elected top leaders, legislative, executive, judicial, they all go to one sector. No one person can be in more than one sector at one time. So let's go through this. Then within each sector, the big idea is roughly a dozen different competitive governing agencies. Everybody in every business selects who's going to govern them. So I might choose a more conservative. My neighbor might choose a more liberal. Some guy down the street might tend towards Brookings Institute type of values, and another neighbor down the street might tend towards Heritage Foundation's values. So each one of these will have a different philosophy of how to govern. And I get to be governed by the way I want to be governed. My neighbor gets to be governed the way they want to be governed. And then each CRA, which is competitive regulatory agencies, it's also competitive governing agencies, and they're also double up as a competitive representative agency. So whenever anything needs to be at a monopolized level, which is a sector board level, the CRA send representatives up there to govern across the board, monopolize. And there are a few sectors, my authorization sectors, anybody with inherent government power, in the military, in law enforcement, and the like, they need to be authorized. So that's a big checks and balance within that sector. We have representative control a lot better than we currently have in our current system, but we don't have government control unless you want to consider each competitive governing agency government. So they are government to a certain degree, but they're more private sector, free enterprise, because they're competitive. So let's get into it. Let's look at it. We have about 15 clauses here, 15 sections of the Constitution. One, citizenship. I just did a video on that. This is going to be talking about the general laws, the bylaws, which we'll talk about that in a different video. Everything's on my website. The whole Constitution is on my website. Section 4 is federal, state, and local, talking about how the separation is there. Original authority, talking about where the top level authority lies. Supermajority, anything at the sector board level, monopolized government, pretty much it needs a 70% majority to have authority to do something, to pass a law, to pass a regulation, to do activity. The parent sector board, there's a video out on that. There's a video out on the CRA sector boards. Everything in this Constitution is built around the competitive regulatory agencies. Section 9 is competitive regulatory agencies, and that's 90% of what this Constitution is. And everything else is supporting the CRA. Then we have the rating system, which is highly important. We're not going to get into that right now on this one. We have taxation, because we still have taxation, guys. Mostly it's just fees for your CRAs, but there are still some taxation involved, and we'll get to that. But that's going to have its own video. Debt is another one, how we deal with the massive amount of debt that our country's in, our states, our localities. Pockets of freedom is a foreign policy and immigration type of policy. We'll have a video on that. There's already videos up on for all these. There's pages on my website, haley2024.org. Everything's there. States partial acceptance per sector, just to get this thing passed through a constitutional amendment. And then separation of responsibilities and authorities into the 30 sectors. We went over those. So let's just go over the general clauses. Now, this is not all the clauses by no means. This is one sector, one section of the Constitution, and it's just some general clauses that are in here. And by no means can you get the whole idea of what the Constitution is from this. This is one of them. So this is just some general ones that went across the whole board and just needs to be in the Constitution. So, definition. Let me just go ahead and read this. Every legal entity must be a person, business, or organization. Put a stop right there real quick. So, the Constitution needs to have some pretty good definitions. And this one's saying that either you're a citizen, a person, you're a business, or you're an organization. It has to be one of those three. And that's a legal entity. So let's keep on reading. Every business and organizations must be controlled by one person or multiple people. Just say, it's helping definitions, because I do not want somebody to look at this Constitution and nitpick and put different definitions in there. So I don't have a ton of definitions within the Constitution, but this is an important one. Every person, business, and organization is a legal entity. For the purposes of this constitutional amendment, an entity is an American legal entity or a foreign entity legally living or doing business in America. An American citizen becomes an independent legal entity 13 years after their birth. And I talk about how teenagers gain incrementally their citizenship, their authority over their own lives until they hit 18, until they get full legal independent legal entity. A person may only hold one official office within any of the numerous CRA structures at any one time. So there's state, there's federal, and there's local CRA structures. There's a different CRA structure for every locality in America, for every state in America. They all have to get along. But a single person can only hold an official office within the CRA structure at any one time. Only American citizens may hold an official office within a CRA structure. Every membership, transaction, contract, or interaction must have an all parties involved agreement. We don't force people to associate with others if they don't want to. This is partly a freedom of association, even though I have a freedom of association clause in there as well. This is it's an important clause, but there are a few clauses that require people to get together and interact. So there's other clauses that limit this, but not much, very, very little, only when it's absolutely necessary. Okay, once this amendment passes, the current government and the parent sector board have broad powers in a 5-year window to implement a transition plan consistent with moving towards a CRA structure. So obviously, when you go free enterprise military, free enterprise education, free enterprise roads, free enterprise law enforcement, free enterprise prisons, and free enterprise court system, and free enterprise land and water, every piece of government-owned property, real estate has to be sold to the private sector. It's a lot. So there's a 5-year transition period. And it doesn't really require 5 years, but because it's such a massive thing, we want to do it right. All laws, regulations, spending, and taxing from the government before this amendment was passed are void after a 5-year transition period. CRAs adopt all current laws and regulations within their jurisdiction unless this amendment addresses the law or CRAs directly address that law and regulation. It might take a while for a CRA to deal with everything that that CRA has to handle. They might not change all the laws all at once. They're allowed to, so this is just a continuation for the laws, and it's a clause, and if you don't understand the whole CRA structure, you're not going to understand this right here. But once you understand the CRA structure, you're going to understand why this is a necessary clause. This U.S. constitutional amendment, this U.S. Constitution is amended by a 75% vote of all federal CRA parent sector board representatives. Constitutional clauses are not subject to repeal or amendment with less than a 75% vote of all federal CRA parent sector board representatives. It's amendment. This is like the Article 5 for the current U.S. Constitution. Article 5 is not a very good constitutional protection for the Constitution. It's actually pretty dangerous. I want to utilize that, obviously, to change the Constitution, but I want to protect the U.S. Constitution by saying the 75% of the parent sector board representatives. So representatives of 75% of the people need to say we need to change the Constitution before it can be, so it can be changed. And when I'm going to do a video of how the political plan I have for changing the Constitution to this, to get through the Article 5 process, you'll see that it's a tad dangerous right now. It's not nearly as protected. A fringe group can come in and change our Constitution, in my view, a little bit too easily. The U.S. Post Office will transition to the free enterprise system. Thus, it is subject to the Section 12 standard transition. Mail delivery will be regulated by CRAs in Sector 29. So the Post Office is going free enterprise, just like everything else. But I need a clause just to say it. No, and everything else is said. All the schools and the military and the law enforcement, that's said in other areas in the different sectors. But that one just didn't seem to have a home, so I put it into the general clauses. No governing body may pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligations of contracts. That's in our current Constitution. I didn't see a reason to get rid of it. So let's just, when something works, we keep it. And I kept the same punctuation that they had in there, and the whole 9 yards, the way it is in our current Constitution. Unless this amendment states differently, all percentage votes listed in this amendment are from the legislative branch of the stated sector board or parent sector board. Okay, I just didn't want to have to keep on saying legislative branch every single time I wrote something out. So I wanted to put one clause in here saying, hey, we're talking about legislative branch. If I say 75% of a sector board needs to do something, then that's what branch we're doing it. I didn't want to have to keep on saying that because I say it often. Okay, let's talk about this. This is our free trade, I believe it is. No sector board or parent sector board may inhibit, restrict, favor, or hamper trade widely defined with other jurisdictions within America or the pockets of freedom. Taxes and regulations at the sector board or parent sector board must be the same for trade within a jurisdiction and trade across jurisdictions. Trade is widely defined in this clause to include products, services, labor, financial transactions, online activity, charity work, among other activity. This clause does not denote or permit sector board or parent sector board authority. This clause restricts sector board or parent sector board authority otherwise authorized by this amendment. This does not allow states to have trade wars at the sector board level. Now, this is not going to be needed because there's very little authority for the sector boards to even have a tax like that. But I don't want there to be any chance that something can be interpreted in a different way, kind of like our current Constitution. They didn't need the First Amendment, Second Amendment, because the listed authorities given to the federal government did not even give it authority to inhibit the free speech, to inhibit, to make laws regarding religion, to make laws regarding firearms, to make laws regarding all this stuff. The original Constitution did not do that. A lot of founding fathers fought against the Bill of Rights for that same reason. But it was needed in the end because the federal government did not protect the Constitution, and we're not really living under the words of the federal Constitution, at least. We say that we are, but in a very large way we're not. The preceding free trade clause applies to the world, however, subject to the foreign policy approved by the federal Sector 6, which you need a 70% vote of the Sector 6 to make foreign policy to a large degree. Subject to restrictions on non-Americans crossing American borders, so we don't just let people come across, and we cannot use that free trade clause to allow people to come across the borders, American borders. Subject to the 5% charity tax on foreign trade, so I do put a charity tax on foreign trade, 5%, and subject to the 5% military capability system tax. So there is a tax on trade going across American borders, 5% and 5%, so it's 10% across the board. But that's military protection, and for the 5% for the military tax, and the charity tax, that's going to be used for strictly foreign aid. That's going to be the foreign aid budget. And it's going to come from trade going across our border. So anything that we want to do foreign aid, helping with poverty in another country, we're going to have competitive charities going over there. So there's a system for that. And this is not the charity. You really need to know the other sectors to do that. You need to know the taxing sectors. You need to know the charity system. You need to know a lot of things. But I'm talking about just the general clauses because if I try to read the full Constitution, it'd be a 10-hour video. Okay, the Federal Parent Sector Board must uniformly define an entity's income, per capita income, and the gross domestic product (GDP), among others needed definitions relating to this clause, relating to clauses in this amendment. So I just used language such as 5% of GDP. Well, what is that? I always try to give a organization, and this one I did the Federal Parent Sector Board, to give a definition. I always try to give a definition or who's going to define something. So when I say something, when I say something in a clause, and it requires a definition, I give it an organization, a sector board, a rating system, something to give that the proper definition. So there's a lot of ways to measure GDP, and I don't want people messing around with that. So I give an organization the authority to do that. Individuals, organizations, businesses, charities, CRAs, among others broadly defined, are not limited at the sector board level, not at the CRA level. Make sure you understand at the sector board level, to interactions, transactions, contracts, assistance, protections, among others broadly defined, with only members of the same CRA. This is all inclusive. This is saying that you do not have to only stay within your CRA. You can do business outside of your CRA. If I belong to a food safety CRA and the restaurant I want to go to is in a different one, I can still go there, and I'll be regulated under their food safety thing. So if I have to go to court for food safety reasons, they got me ill or whatever, food poisoning, I have to go through their judicial system. Because everybody has their judicial system. Every CRA has a judicial branch. Let's keep on going on. Unless directly stated in this amendment, every threshold, definition, and subjective term must be given clear meaning and implication by the judicial sector's rating system. That's a representative body. Every RA, which is a rating agency, has standing to pose a clarifying question to the judicial sector's rating system, which an answer must be given within 9 months. So there's a lot of ways people are going to try to play games with definitions. And they're going to argue that this does not apply, or this does apply, or this is misdefined, or whatever. So I always try to give a organization the authority to define something. And every good constitution should. So, okay. This is just one of a lot of videos between February, March, and probably going into April. We'll have several dozen videos defining this new Constitution. I did a lot of videos about a year ago defining the U.S. Constitution and all the reforms and how we go free enterprise, military, education, roads, social security, get government out of healthcare, unless you want it in your healthcare within your chosen CRA. But you select your CRAs. Anyway, please consider a donation to Haley 2024 The Movement. And until the next video.